Here's some tips to do with your winch that are so often overlooked, and it could absolutely cost you when you're out there on the tracks. So your winch lives in the bull bar or on the front of your vehicle, and let's be honest, it's pretty much forgotten about. Let's face it, who sits there and thinks, oh, I better do a little bit of maintenance on my winch? Well, you're going to think about it when you're on the trail that day and you go to use your winch and it's got a problem. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about in this video. You see, there's a couple of simple things you can do when you get home from a trip or just, somewhere on the way so that you can make sure your winch is ready for use. The first is, once you've used your winch, there's a really good chance that the winch rope is going to be bunched up and the rope lines are going to be stuck down in amongst each other and all jammed up. So we want to fix that. That's the first thing we want to do. The next thing we're going to want to do is inspect our winch rope and make sure that there's no cuts or frays or really damaged parts that compromise the winch line and make it weaker than it needs to be. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the winch rope so that we can start the process. So I've already done some of this process, but basically I've hooked the winch line to a tree up there and then pulled off some rope, and that's just so that I can save you time watching the video. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the winch into its free spool mode, and that means that I can pull the winch rope out, and somewhere at the end of the line I'm going to see a marker which shows me that I'm getting towards the end of the winch rope. At this point, I'm going to keep pulling until I have about 3 wraps on the winch drum. So the next step is to drive backwards slowly and put a little bit of tension on the winch rope. You don't want to overdo this step because you don't want to pull the winch rope off your winch drum. So what I'm looking for is any frays or damage to the winch rope. Now you may find that the winch rope in sections has got sand and dirt in it. Well, you want to clean that out because that's going to be like an abrasive inside the rope when you use it. The easiest way to clean it out is to put it in a bucket of water and work the fibers like you can see me doing here. So now it's time to put the winch rope back onto the winch drum, but there's a special way I like to do this. Now, if you've got a second person, this process is so much easier because you can have somebody sitting in the driver's seat. I don't have a someone because they're driving the camera and it's just me. So I'm going to show you how you do it by yourself, which is a little bit more tedious, but I've got the vehicle in neutral and I've got the handbrake on just a few clicks. I don't want it on too heavy. The idea is we want to pull the winch rope onto the drum so it's nice and firm, but not stupid tight like we would have in a recovery scenario. And the way we're going to layer the rope is the first layer, we're going to layer the rope nice and side by side like this. And then after we've done that for a layer, we're then going to do a fast pass of the winch rope. So we end up with a winch rope going across the layers like this. And why that's going to help us is it's going to stop the winch rope from pulling down into the lower layers. And the way we're going to build up the rope, we're going to do side by side, crossover, side by side, crossover, and that's going to make sure that the winch rope comes out nice and easy when we want to use it. It's really important you keep the motor running because you're going to use a fair bit of power from the batteries in this process. Now grab your remote control, and I love these Bluetooth remote controls rather than the wired cable, and there's one simple reason for that. It means you can be a lot further away from the fair lead. And there's an important safety reason for that. You see, if you're up close to the fair lead and your hand was to get caught in the winch rope, you'll get your hand sucked right into the fair lead, and that's going to hurt. Actually, you're probably going to lose your hand. But anyway, I prefer to be doing anything with the winch from this sort of distance. It's about 2 meters or so away from the fair lead. And that's why a remote control like this is just fantastic. Now the way I like to do this is I actually steer the rope with my legs. I have my legs like that and I can steer the rope onto the winch drum, and from here I can actually see the winch drum. Now you might be saying, oh but Matt, you should never stand over a winch rope. When you're doing a hardcore winch, I totally agree. I'm pulling the thing on its handbrake. There's hardly any load on the winch line, okay? Now, what's more, it's my family jewels on the line, and I think they're okay. Now this is definitely a part where you can absolutely hurt yourself. Notice how I'm holding the hook so that my fingers are not behind it like this, and that's so they don't get crushed as I finish putting the hook away. Now the last tip I want to give you is when you store your winch, I always like to store them in the engaged position, because if you store it in the free spool, over time the winch rope will fall out of the fair lead and it can get snagged on things and damaged. So store your winch in the engaged position. I'm Mad Matt, stay safe on the trails.